welcome everybody to our downtown Toronto studios. I am John Pollock alongside John Rambine and Robin Black. In just a few moments' time, we'll be sending you down to Brooklyn, New York for the ceremonial weigh-ins for Saturday night's UFC 208 card, which is headlined by Germaine de Randamie and Holly Holm, as we will crown the first women's featherweight champion. John, the outcry over this particular championship has been massive. But this is a really great fight on Saturday.
It's a great fight, and it's a great card. When you look at some of the other big names that are on the card, you have Anderson Silva on the card, you have Dustin Poirier, in my opinion, super exciting fighter, and you look at all the other names. If you are a fight fan, this is a fight you need to see. And Holly Holm, essentially, yes, she can make history by becoming the first ever 145-pound champion, as can Germaine de Randamie. But Holly Holm can make history by joining both Randy Couture, Randy Couture, BJ Penn, and Conor McGregor as the only two-division champions. So she doesn't want
David Branch, how about some love here?
I'm saying UFC champion. Yeah, and it makes sense. He was holding at the same time 85 and 205 pounds. But if she can do that, an incredible feat.
Yeah, and a really tough fight. Really, really challenging fight. Germaine de Randamie is outstanding, really sharp. Those elbows are mean. The knees, if she gets into that clinch, she will liquefy your insides. She's a tough one to deal with. But Holly on the outside, I think, is going to be very, very patient, look to be winning the later rounds, but it stacks up. The way these two stack up, the fight itself is just absolutely beautiful.
That sounds like a just awful metal album. Liquefy your insides. That sounds fantastic.
Sounds like a great album title.
Robin, in breaking down this fight involving Holm and de Randamie, is there anything new you learned about Germaine de Randamie, who, let's be honest, she hasn't been the most active fighter in the UFC at the women's bantamweight division, but someone that it's going to be difficult. Can you take a lot of how great she's looked in some of her fights and now extrapolate that to perform against Holm?
Great question. And at first, when you look at the tape and you really start with some super slow-mo and you look at some of the offensive weaponry that she's used, it is shocking when you see in slow motion her uncorking these overhand rights, knees to the body, vicious, vicious striking. However, you make the important point here, the important distinction. Holly Holm really moves her feet. And we will see in this highlight reel, the Iron Lady, she's got iron fists, man, and knees. When she gets into that clinch and she's there on the occipital bone and bending down, driving the forearms into the collarbones. Watch this one. That's the liquefaction of the insides I was speaking of, brother. It's vicious. But these girls that she has fought are nowhere near the level of how Holly Holm fights, so that's what makes it so interesting.
As well, I would feel for de Randamie, you don't want to necessarily expend so much that you tire yourself out, but I think trying to get Holm into that rhythm where she's just playing a counter game and de Randamie is looking for those openings that, you know, Robin, you outlined in your breakdowns of where she can land just such clean strikes and one of those missiles to the body, and that could be it for Holly Holm.
Yeah, and I suspect that she will be looking to get into the clinch, and if the Jackson Winklejohn team is anticipating that, I believe they'll look to try to get to the body lock and wrestle. Yes, Holly Holm, how many times? 700 million times she's been a boxing world champion. It's a lot. However many it is. And yes, she can fight on the feet. Of course she wants to counter-strike with this woman, but I would be shocked if I didn't see her end up on top of GDR at least a couple times and try to work elbows or go to the back.
Wrestling might be some interesting element to this, John, in her back pocket and working with someone like an Izzy Martinez, because that's certainly an area to challenge Germaine de Randamie.
Yeah, and you imagine that de Randamie's going to make this an MMA Muay Thai match, and Holly Holm will do her best to make it a kickboxing match, but throw in wrestling there.
All right, it's all going to be going down at the Barclays Center, and that is where we send you for the weigh-ins.
UFC Fight Pass prelims. First fight in the welterweight division. Ryan LaFleur versus Rowan Jucal Carneiro.
Great fight at 170 pounds. There you see Juan Carneiro made his mixed martial arts debut back in the year 2000. Wow. 17 years in mixed martial arts. His second stint with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and his last two wins coming against Kenny Robertson and Mark Munoz, guys that have, traits similar to Ryan LaFleur.
Yeah, he's going to be real sharp. He's got to understand, and I know that he does, that this game is going to have to be fought on the feet. To get LaFleur down is an incredible challenge, and we saw how well LaFleur did for 25 minutes with Damian Maia. So he's going to have to try to make LaFleur miss and land counter shots.
Ryan LaFleur has been a champion for the Ring of Combat organization from nearby New Jersey. He is from New York, so I'm sure he'll have a big pop from the crowd.
People don't understand how good this guy is. Only Damian Maia was able to beat him, and he was coming on at the end of that fight. If it was 6 rounds or 7 rounds, he would have won it. This is a new age, new level of guy. He's an outstanding killer fighter. Kind of looks like Dana.
But Robin, we've talked about it, 170 pounds, very, very difficult to make some noise. 145 pounds, this is a division emerging as one of the divisions to watch out for. You and I have had the chance to call Rick Glen's fights before he fought in the UFC, but he will be in tough. Felipe Nover fighting in his own backyard of Brooklyn. Even though he didn't get the win in his last 2 fights, maybe look better than we've ever seen him.
He really has looked phenomenal. When you're in there with Barao and you're able to move like that with him, I mean, he is clearly the best he's ever been. He's at a very, very high level, but he needs to be, man. Rick Glen is the real deal. We're marks for Rick Glen. We've been fans for 5, 6 years watching him develop. This is a great one, man. I think this is the main event on Fight Pass.
Rick Glen, we know he has spent time in the past working with the Rufus Sport Camp. He can get it done any way he needs to get it done. A very impressive resume for the Gladiator, Rick Glen. 18-4-1 as a mixed martial arts professional. Everybody saw his last performance, a losing effort against Evan Dunham, a fight he took on short notice.
Just look how long his arms are. There's something weird about his proportionality, and when he fights from southpaw in particular, look,
that's nice.
Yeah, that is nice. Isn't that sweet? Rick Glen's going to be his Valentine. He may not be impressed with that, but he has a good sense of humor about it. But from southpaw, man, Rick Glen is real dangerous.
I'll tell you, this is one of the fights I have really been looking forward to. Ian McCall, I've really seen so many of his fights, followed his career. One of those fighters you needed to watch out for as we saw the 125-pound division unfold. But there's something that makes me want to tune into this youngster, Jared Brooks, undefeated as a mixed martial arts pro. In his prime at 23 years of age, seems to be full of confidence. There you see James Lee, Pride veteran, in his corner.
Yeah, and he's got to feel good to be standing there. Dude's fought at 115. Like, you're going to see, even Ian is much bigger than him, but Ian is a legend at 125 pounds, one of the real true pioneers of the weight division.
And you see him there, Jason Perillo, in his corner. Went the distance against one of the pound-for-pound best fighters on the planet. And Demetrius Johnson also went the distance with Dominic Cruz.
The game everybody talks about these days, the new vibe, is distance management, the movement. And this guy's been doing that for years and years and years. It's not going to feel new, even with a kid like Brooks, it's not going to feel new to him. He's done this plenty of times against the best fighters in the world.
Uncle Creepy has had 6 bouts since his time in Tachi fall apart because of injury or illness. Was supposed to fight Neil Seery at Fight Night 99, but again, had to pull out of that card, and now just playing mind games with the youngster.
Hey man, this is all novel experiences for Brooks, all of it. So, and it is not for Ian McCall, so he knows he can play with this kid a little bit, and it's smart to do so.
With that, we get to our next prelim in the lightweight division. Nick the Carney Lentz versus Islam Makhachev.
Makhachev there, Islam Makhachev, 13-1. Is this a guy we need to keep our eyes out when you look at the division, one of the most exciting divisions in the world, or is it going to take a couple of wins over some big names, starting with the Carney, before people take notice?
Yeah, he's going to need to shake Lentz off early. Just shake him off when he gets and tries to attach himself to you, makes a little bit of space, and try to knee him up the middle. But yeah, a guy like Nick Lentz, I mean, Conor McGregor doesn't know his name, but a lot of people do. And it starts here. And if you can't get through Nick Lentz at this stage, a very, very tough fight, you know, you learn very quickly where you really are at.
It really feels like Nick Lentz is like a no-win situation. Unless you're a hardcore fan, you know who this guy is, but you can't ever look really good against him.
No, very hard to look good against him. And it's fun watching grinders like this, true grinders, the elite of the grinder. It's fun watching. There's a beauty in how they fight.
The Carney, 32 years of age, working at that American top team in Coconut Creek, Florida.
Wilson Hayes versus Uluka Sasaki.
Earlier today, we were talking about Elite XC, and we will see the former Elite XC champion, but his opponent is Sasaki. His second stint in the UFC.
We get the great gift of calling some pancrase fights, you and I, and the deep organization. And the game over in Japan is changing rapidly. There was a real westernization of how the Japanese fighters fought, but now you're seeing a lot more innovation.
And his opponent, Wilson Hayes.
This is a tough dude.
And Robin, when you know you have a specific skill set that is better than most in your division, how important is it that you force the fight there? Wilson Hayes, we know about his jiu-jitsu game. Does he make this fight about jiu-jitsu?
Yes, and not only is his jiu-jitsu going to wipe out most guys in his weight class, it's the specific element of his jiu-jitsu. He'll get to your back, and he gets to your back in such wild and creative ways, and when he gets there, oh yeah. Well, the easiest way to get to someone's back is they come straight at you.
He is not rattled at all by Sasaki.
So, he seemed to find it amusing, but if Sasaki's going to move towards him, he's going to get the body lock and reach for that back shoulder.
Prelim in the welterweight division, Randy Rude Boy Brown versus Bilal, remember the name, Muhammad.
Bilal Muhammad takes this fight on short notice. 10-2 as a mixed martial arts pro. Looking to rebound from a TKO loss in his last fight. Is that a difficult thing when you're stopped in your fight to move past that?
Yeah, it definitely can be a challenge. But you know, staying in the kind of shape where you can make weight on for a short notice fight says that he's mentally where he needs to be and he's training super focused. So that's a good sign.
New York, Randy Rude Boy Brown.
Randy Brown representing Queens, New York. Crowd on his side.
He's a good, solid welterweight. Killer shape.
And quite the record so far in the UFC, 3-1.
Yeah, not a bad way to start.
Looking to make it through 3 in a row.
170.5 the official weight for Randy Brown.
Just chilled, you know. Able to take it as it comes. Smart fighter. He's got some real size on him.
All right, now we get to the main card for UFC 208. First up, in the lightweight division, Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Jim Miller. First fighter to the scale, 26 UFC appearance for New Jersey's Jim Miller.
Jim Miller from New Jersey. Really has seen it all in mixed martial arts, Robin. When you look at his career, 28 professional wins, 8 losses, been paired with some of the most dangerous and skilled fighters on the planet.
Amazing athlete, amazing fighter. Just shows up, ready for hard work every time. Sets the buzzer, the clipper to 5, shaves the head down, grabs the lunch bucket, and just shows up and fights.
But you look at this fight with Dustin Poirier, it feels that Poirier might be a little slicker, he might be a little longer, and his technique might be a little cleaner. Does that matter?
He's got to make it matter. You know that Miller's just going to keep coming at you. Southpaw versus Southpaw. Both guys' last losses are to Southpaws. It's a fascinating dynamic between these two. Poirier has really grown mentally as a fighter too over the last couple of
You
years.
still get the sense that he's jumpy, that he wants to scrap right there.
Yeah, it's in him.
In the UFC's light heavyweight division, Glover Teixeira versus Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier.
Jared Cannonier, second fight at 205 pounds.
This big Alaskan has knocked out plenty of heavyweights in his lifetime.
But he isn't tough. We saw that last fight with Kudalaba, and Kudalaba managed to take him down a number of times, despite the fact that he had the speed advantage. Do you think in this fight he makes it about speed?
I think if I'm Teixeira, I'm putting this guy on his back as early as possible, and especially if he's aggressive. If he's hyper-aggressive at you, Teixeira shoot in and put him on his back, beat a little bit of that energy out of him.
But Teixeira, Robin, we've also seen, he's been around the game for a long time. He's taken some abuse. He's closer to 40 than he is to 30. Is his approach just be tougher?
Yeah, but you know, 13 seconds and he was unconscious with Anthony Johnson. And
But that's AJ.
yeah, it's true. Tough is great, but I think if I'm him and I think if you're his team, you're like, let's put this guy on his back early. Let's get comfortable in there. Let's put some minutes in and be on top of him, elbow him. Maybe he'll give you up his back. Let's approach it that way. And speaking of that, this guy will do the same.
Tim the Barbarian Boach.
There you see Tim Boach decided to stay in Pennsylvania for this training camp. moves, the Irish hand grenade. UFC veteran, looking for his 21st victory.
When we were putting together some keys to victory, you know, there are moments where he's partially taken down, or a knee gets down, or he's mid-wrestling, and he just never surrenders that position, and that's what he has to do against this monster.
Well, he has been submitted by Talis Laitis, Phil Davis, and Luke Rockhold, and if those guys can submit you, you know that Jacare is going to be able to submit you as well.
Just do yourself a favor and go back and watch a few of his submissions. If you put together a highlight reel of the nonsense that are his submissions, they're just unbelievable. So beautiful, so smooth. Sometimes you can't even tell what's where. It's just a French braid of flesh and bone, and he is something very, very special in that arena.
Can that freeze a fighter if you think, okay, I don't want to go to the ground, I don't want to go to the ground, you're constantly thinking about stopping the takedown and ensuring the fight doesn't hit the mat? Does that leave you open for strikes?
It can, and his wrestling is so smooth, it's going to be a tough one.
Also in the middleweight division, Anderson the Spider Silva.
I guess people still want to see Anderson Silva.
Brunson.
Yep, I do.
Derek Brunson, top 185-pound fighter. One of the biggest tests, if not the biggest test of his mixed martial arts career. Decided to spend his training camp at home as well in North Carolina instead of working with Greg Jackson.
I don't like the sound of that when you're preparing for one of the greatest fighters of all time. But I love this guy, the way he fights, the way he lands those knuckles. In his last fight, he pushed a little too hard early. He cannot do that against Anderson Silva.
Anderson Silva, we know he can fight, but where is he at this stage of his mixed martial arts career? Well, he's had the luxury of training with Jacare. What do you think Jacare was doing in the training room to get this guy ready?
You know, Jacare, you talk about one guy training by himself, or you know, with his own team instead of the original team, and the other one training with Jacare. Jacare is very dangerous, underrated on the feet, especially with his overhand right. So he'll be able to really emulate Derek Brunson. It's real now. You're looking at one of the greatest fighters of all time, and on Saturday night, you're going to fight him.
Wow. How does Derek Brunson not get
And with
starstruck?
that, it is now time to take a
He's
closer
ready.
look at the two women who tomorrow night will compete for the inaugural UFC Women's Featherweight Championship.
Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face.
Ronda's in trouble. She's hurt. Oh! Holly looking to finish. She's out.
A fight can change in a split second. One tiny mistake, and the fight is over.
Misha's got her neck. She's got it. She's tapping. Amanda Nunes is the first female Brazilian UFC champion.
I think the world hasn't seen the best yet.
It's in. It's in. It's all over.
I don't really care what my fight does for the sport. I care about the win. But in turn, I think that is good for the sport. Now I get to do something nobody else has had the opportunity to do.
When Holly Holm faces Germaine Durandamy for the inaugural UFC Women's Featherweight Championship, you have arguably the two most decorated strikers to ever compete in mixed martial arts. In Holly Holm, you have an 18-time world boxing champion, and Germaine Durandamy is 46-0 in Muay Thai and a 10-time world Muay Thai champion.
I love to brawl. The UFC will see something they've never seen before.
This is a new start. It's definitely different emotions, definitely a different scenario.
Who would have thought that I would get a title shot? That I would make it to a UFC main event, the second event in New York? I know this is my one and only chance. Where everybody doubted me, I made it, and I'm gonna fight for the UFC belt.
If I had my perfect world, I would have the 145-pound belt and the 135-pound belt. If you have dreams, my dad always says aim high.
I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the UFC belt.
This is history. People are going to be talking about this fight.
First fighter to the scale, the Iron Lady, Germaine Durandamy.
Germaine Durandamy looking to become the 145-pound champion. We know all about her stand-up abilities, her Muay Thai background. But what about the other areas of her game?
We're going to find out because Holly's going to test those. And this woman, the way that she generates power is unbelievable. But Holly's going to try to be super mobile and not be in a position to be landed on by this woman, because if she hits you, man, she delivers so much force.
Holly Holm, these two seem to match up in the stand-up department anyways, well on paper. But do we believe that Holly Holm will flip the script and make it all about grappling?
Yeah, I think she's going to take a generalist approach. You know, when we're on the feet, yeah, I believe I can outbox this woman. But we're going to try to put her in areas where she has to test all of those other skills. And Holm has been able to keep all those skills in her back pocket. We've barely seen them. So it's going to be fascinating. She took down Ronda Rousey.
Yep. One of the things I have noticed about de Randamie is she has been full of confidence in the lead up to this fight. She believes that she is destined to be here, as we hear for the title challenger.
So here you are with an entire nation of Holland behind you. Your thoughts on the eve of your first UFC championship opportunity?
First of all, Brooklyn, it's an honor to be here. The only thing I can say is let's make it one hell of a night with all of you. Let's go.
There she is. Wish you all the best tomorrow night. Ladies and gentlemen, Germaine de Randamie. All right, you've been here before. Holly Holm, third championship fight in the UFC. Your thoughts here on the eve of another massive moment in your career?
You know, it's time. All the hard work's in, and I'm just, it's those moments where I'm worked up, like, gosh, it's tomorrow, and then I think, okay, chill out, because it's not till tomorrow.
Enjoy the night. We'll see you tomorrow night. There she is, Holly Holm. All right, Brooklyn, New York, thanks for coming out. We'll see you over at Barclays Center for the fights tomorrow night.
We are back, and all the fighters making weight, as we expected, given the fact that it happened hours ago on Friday morning. But
the fake weigh-in.
The ceremonial weigh-ins, John, is the official term that they give them. But nonetheless, anything you took from any of the fighters, in particular Holly Holm and Germaine de Randamie, now that they've had a number of hours to rehydrate?
Not really. I'm just really excited to see this fight. The one thing I have noticed is just how jovial Germaine de Randamie is. She's accepted this this idea of fighting for a UFC championship, and it feels like she's running with it. I'm just curious to know what the strategy is. Does she believe that Holly Holm is going to engage in a stand-up kickboxing matchup where she feels that she'll have the advantage? Or is she ready for all the other tools that Holly Holm is going to throw her way?
I'm sure she's aware that that's a definite possibility, that Holm will try to enter a little bit deeper in, get into the body, push her up against the cage. I'm sure she's prepared for that, but being prepared psychologically for it and dealing with the reality when it happens is a whole different thing. That's why we do these fights. That's why we're excited to see this fight. Of course, I want to see knees and elbows, punches at distance, all of those things, but I believe we're going to see a lot more of a general approach in this fight, and this woman has to prove that she's at the level of Holly Holm.
As well, the fact that this is going to be a 5-round fight, that presents some interesting questions there. We saw Holly Holm go 25 minutes in her last fight, but I don't know if you necessarily view that as a positive or not. Holm had a very difficult time adjusting and ended up walking into issues with Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah, I totally get it, but it's valuable experience. If she thought that maybe she had the energy, what could she do, this time to make sure she manages her energy properly, that she's as strong at minute 24 as she was minute 2. And I know that's impossible, but as close to that as humanly possible. You would imagine that part of the strategy is make sure that de Randamie goes into round 4 and 5 where you can exploit that.
Holm is in sick shape. Yeah. You can see it, and that is a reflection. We're often, it's not a bodybuilding contest, but it is a reflection of the work that's been put in, and work had to be put in for her to be prepared for this. There's a psychological element, no doubt, too. In that last fight with Shevchenko, she started to snowball downhill a little bit. As she got frustrated, she got over-aggressive. She walked into things that, Shevchenko did to her what she did to Ronda, drew her into the space and struck her, then made her right there, drawing her in, and then she engaged her in the wrestling. And, she's going to have taken a lot from this fight, but she needs to perform. She needs to come in and be at her best, because when she's at her best, she is an outstanding fighter, one of the best featherweights in the world, possibly the best. We're going to find out.
And, we stated it before the weigh-ins, the fact, what kind of factors does wrestling play into this fight, if
Huge.
at all? It's certainly something that you would have to imagine is something Holm has to be focused on in this camp, and presenting something to Germaine de Randamie that could be a big issue.
I think she's got to sneak it in there, though. Make sure you get Germaine de Randamie believing that this is going to be a Muay Thai match, that the idea is get her really comfortable in the stand-up spots, and that's when you put her on the ground. And I expect that's what we're going to see. But again, the Shevchenko fight, Shevchenko was also a Muay Thai champion. So again, a lot of valuable lessons that Holly Holm can take away from that fight.
Very true. And the Miesha Tate fight, Holly had a brilliant, 23 minutes before that moment, and really looked phenomenal in this fight. Was managing the distance well, was super patient, was technically very strong. That kind of interception, this is her against the orthodox fighter. Again, Shevchenko is also a southpaw, but de Randamie is an orthodox fighter, and this is where she is at her best. But she also, so fighting from a left-handed stance, she is one of her advantages, and another is her reach. And in this one, she doesn't have that reach advantage she's accustomed to. So do I expect de Randamie, like Miesha, to be able to get to her back and choke her? No. I think that's something she will try to do in this fight. But not just, hey, how's your wrestling? Look, we're wrestling. Are you as good a wrestler as me? It's not just that simple. It's drawing and blending the wrestling and the striking and making her brain shift back and forth through the different zones of combat. That's what Holly wants to do.
Do you believe that part of the strategy for de Randamie is, okay, we know that Holly Holm is super mobile. Let's smash up those legs every chance that we can get to slow her down, to make sure that we can see her shots coming from a mile away.
I'm really interested to see this too, because when she lost to Amanda, when de Randamie lost to Amanda, she was still kicking a little bit then, and I believe it was a kick that was caught or blocked that made her go to the ground. And since then, it's been all knuckles, as you see here again in these fights. Knees maybe when you've got the tie clinch, and otherwise, oh my God, look at that right hand. It's been that. But the difference is Holly Holm will not be standing in front of you. Holly Holm will be moving out to her right. She'll be circling, playing with distance, playing with timing, messing with your rhythm a little bit. So the fight will look very different, because if you look what happens if you stand in front of that woman. You see what happened? You want that thing arcing down on you like that? Yikes.
As well as we look at this featherweight division, I mean, that is obviously going to be the biggest topic coming out of this, is realistically how either of these women acclimate themselves at 145 pounds, and if their desire is to fight at 145 beyond this particular fight. As you mentioned, there are no other immediate contenders. There are no contenders in this division. It's an occupancy of 2 and might be 1, if not 0, by Monday. So it's a division that I don't know how much stock people are even putting into the weight class. I think they're interested in the fight, but the weight class as a whole, it's just a lot of questions.
Sure, but it starts with the fight. So let's start at this point. Let's see what these two ladies can deliver inside of the cage, and hopefully there's some sort of story that comes out of that. I would imagine the UFC has some sort of strategy of what they're going to do with this women's 145-pound division. I'm sure they've talked to a lot of the bantamweights, the bigger bantamweights, asking if anybody's willing to move up. On top of that, I'm sure the hope is that Cyborg will get her act together and eventually make her way back to the UFC sooner rather than later. But it starts with this fight on Saturday night, and you go from there.
I think it ends with this fight on Saturday night in good ways as well. Belts, divisions, rankings, all of those things are mechanisms to draw your attention in so that you have something to connect to, and then you see this beautiful fight. And if you fall in love with the art of fighting enough, you don't care about any of those things. And to a certain degree, we've shifted our focus so heavily to these mechanisms sometimes that it distracts us from the fight itself. In this one, we're like, what do they weigh? There's a gold thing. What? It's a great fight, you know. And I always look at fights that way.
Glass half full, Robin Black. The pay-per-view goes down on Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. It is headlined by Holly Holm and Germaine de Randamie from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York.